There comes a moment in every man's life when he must choose between the safety of cowardice and the risk of courage. For Daniel Carter, that moment arrived during a snowstorm, when he saw something that would change his life forever. He had no idea that stopping his car on Interstate 25 would lead him to uncover a corruption network that reached all the way to his own boss, or that a simple act of love would place him at the center of a battle against dangerous criminals. What began as rescuing an injured animal transformed into the most dangerous and life-changing journey of his existence. It was as if fate had conspired to test not only his compassion, but his courage to face injustice when it hides behind familiar and trusted faces. The story you're about to hear isn't just about a man who saved a dog. It's about how sometimes we need to rescue others to discover who we really are. Daniel lived an empty existence, working as an accountant in Denver, following the same monotonous routine every day, never suspecting that his own company was being used to cover up terrible crimes. He was the perfect employee, reliable, discreet, never asking inconvenient questions. But when love for an abandoned golden retriever awakened something dormant in his soul, Daniel discovered there were dark forces operating right under his nose. It was like living next to a monster disguised as a mentor, working for a man who hid a cruelty that Daniel could never have imagined. What Daniel didn't know was that his act of compassion would put him in an impossible position, discovering that his own boss was behind a money laundering network that used animal abuse as a front. It was like discovering that the person he trusted most professionally was responsible for the suffering of the animal he had learned to love more than his own life. The choice that presented itself was devastating: maintain his safe and comfortable life, or risk everything to expose the truth. It was a decision that would test not only his courage but his very soul. Would he be able to do the right thing when it meant losing everything he knew? This is a story about transformation, about how true love can awaken a courage we didn't even know we possessed. It's about an ordinary man who discovered extraordinary reserves of bravery when forced to choose between his own safety and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. But it's also a story about justice, not the bitter and destructive kind, but the sweet justice served to those who abuse the innocent. Daniel was about to discover that sometimes the universe places the right people in the right places to expose darkness and bring light where it's needed most. It was as if his entire life had been preparation for this moment, when he would finally have the chance to become the hero he always had the potential to be. You know that feeling of living on autopilot? Daniel Carter knew that reality better than anyone. At 32, he had become an expert at living without really living. Every morning, the alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. He drank the same reheated coffee, put on one of 5 identical dress shirts he owned, and drove down Interstate 25 to the accounting office where he'd worked for 8 years. It was as if his life were a black and white movie, where each day blended into the previous one in an almost hypnotic monotony. Denver, with its majestic mountains in the background, offered enough inspiration for any soul, but Daniel had become immune to the beauty around him. He wasn't unhappy, just empty, like a glass that was never filled, but also never broke. His love for life had gotten lost somewhere between Excel spreadsheets and monthly reports that no one really read. It was a safe, predictable existence, completely without purpose. Each morning was a repetition of the previous one, as if he were a caged animal who forgot the door was open. Routine had become his favorite prison, where nothing extraordinary could happen, but also nothing terrible could touch him. Daniel had built a fortress of mediocrity around himself and was comfortably uncomfortable inside it. It was like living in a transparent bubble, watching the world go by without ever really participating in it. Inspiration was a distant concept, something that happened to other people in other lives. The Johnson & Associates office was one of those places where time seemed to stop. Gray cubicles, bad coffee, and conversations about the weather dominated the environment like a monotonous symphony. Daniel stood out by being invisible. He never caused problems, never questioned orders, never showed ambition beyond what was necessary to keep his job. His colleagues saw him as that nice guy from accounting, but no one really knew him. It was as if he were a friendly ghost haunting the office, present but not really there. Meetings passed through him like water flowing over a stone, leaving only a vague dampness of boredom. He had become a master at appearing busy without being truly engaged, a skill he'd developed over years of practice. The numbers in his spreadsheets told stories of companies and people, but he had lost the ability to see beyond the digits. It was like being a translator of a language he no longer spoke fluently, the language of passion and purpose. His colleagues talked about weekend plans, dream vacations, and relationships, while Daniel just smiled and agreed politely. His love for his work had died long ago, but he kept showing up every day like a domesticated animal that forgot its wild instincts. It was a life of emotional survival, where each day was a small victory just for having passed. The courage to change seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford, or perhaps no longer knew how to access. It was easier to stay in the comfort zone, even if that zone was more like a gilded cage. Daniel's weekends followed a script as rigid as his weekdays. Netflix, frozen pizza, and the constant struggle to ignore calls from his sister Amanda dominated his 48 hours of freedom. She always called with that tone of voice that mixed concern and frustration, trying to convince him to get out more, meet people, live life. Daniel had become a master at inventing excuses. He was tired, had work to do at home, or simply wasn't in the mood to socialize. The truth was simpler and more painful. He had lost the courage to try. Every attempt at change seemed to require energy he no longer possessed, like an injured animal avoiding using a hurt paw. It was easier to stay in the comfort zone, watching shows about people who lived the adventures he didn't have the courage to seek. Romantic love was a concept he observed on television, like watching documentaries about exotic places he'd never visit. Amanda always ended the calls with a sigh of resignation, and Daniel always hung up with a mix of guilt and relief. It was as if he were watching his own life from the outside, unable to enter and take control. Inspiration for change came in occasional waves, usually after watching some motivational movie, but always disappeared the next morning like a dream that evaporates. He had convinced himself that this was the life of a responsible adult: work, pay bills, and not bother anyone. But deep down, a small voice whispered that there was something more waiting for him, a voice he had learned to silence with the efficiency of someone who masters complex spreadsheets. Routine had become his favorite pet, predictable, reliable, and one that would never disappoint him. Every morning, Daniel passed the same gas station, greeted the same attendant with a polite wave, and bought the same ham sandwich for lunch. It was a choreographed dance of mediocrity, where each step was calculated to avoid unpleasant surprises. The gas station attendant, an older man named Frank, always smiled and asked about the weather, and Daniel always responded with the same empty phrases about traffic or the climate. It was as if both were playing roles in a play that no one else was watching. Daniel had mapped his life so he could navigate it with his eyes closed, avoiding any detour that might lead to unknown territory. It was an emotional survival strategy that worked perfectly, until the day it wouldn't work anymore. He didn't know he was being prepared for something greater, that his ability to find patterns and solve problems would be exactly what he'd need when chaos knocked on his door. Life has a peculiar way of training us for moments we don't even know are coming. Like an animal that develops specific instincts to survive, Daniel was unconsciously preparing for a challenge that would test not only his professional skills, but his very humanity. Inspiration was dormant within him, waiting for the right moment to awaken like a seed awaiting spring. He had no idea that his meticulous nature, which seemed so mundane in the office, was being forged for something much greater. His love for life was just hibernating, not dead. Daniel's apartment perfectly reflected his personality: functional, clean, and completely without personality. Department store furniture, white walls without pictures, and a refrigerator decorated only with promotional magnets from pizza places created an environment that looked more like an extended stay hotel than a home. There were no family photos, no plants, nothing that indicated a person with dreams and aspirations lived there. It was as if he were just passing through his own life, never really settling in or putting down roots. The few books he owned were accounting manuals and some novels Amanda had given him as gifts that remained untouched. The apartment's silence was broken only by the refrigerator's hum and the occasional sound of neighbors living their lives on the other side of thin walls. Daniel had grown accustomed to solitude in a way that he no longer even noticed its weight. It was like a solitary animal that forgot how to live in a group, finding a strange peace in the absence of social complications. Friends? Few, and most were work colleagues he only saw at mandatory happy hours, where he pretended interest in conversations about sports and politics. Romantic love was a distant concept, something that happened to other people, in other worlds, like stories he read about ancient civilizations. He had convinced himself it was better this way, that relationships were unnecessary complications that would only bring drama to his carefully organized life. But sometimes, on the quietest nights, he found himself imagining what it would be like to have someone to share breakfast with or watch movies on the couch. But life has a peculiar way of preparing us for moments we don't even know are coming, like an invisible trainer who strengthens us for future battles. Daniel had no idea that his ability to organize numbers and solve complex problems would be exactly what he'd need when chaos knocked on his door. His meticulous nature, which seemed so mundane in the office, was being forged for something much greater than quarterly reports. Like a wild animal that develops specific instincts to survive in hostile environments, Daniel was unconsciously preparing for a challenge that would test not only his professional skills, but his very humanity. Inspiration was dormant within him, like a flame that was never completely extinguished, just covered by ashes of routine and conformity. His years of experience finding discrepancies in spreadsheets had trained him to detect when something wasn't right, a skill that would soon prove invaluable. His love for justice, though buried under layers of apathy, still pulsed weakly in his heart like a hibernating animal. He had developed an emotional resilience that would protect him when he faced situations that would break less prepared people. Courage was there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge, like a muscle that had never been used but was ready for action. Daniel didn't know it, but he was about to discover reserves of strength he never imagined he possessed. His apparently purposeless life was about to find meaning that would transform not only his future, but his understanding of who he really was. It was as if all those years of unconscious preparation were about to make sense in a way he could never have predicted. Denver's snowstorms were famous for arriving without warning, transforming familiar landscapes into unrecognizable scenes in a matter of hours. Daniel always saw them as just another inconvenience in his already complicated routine: slow traffic, dangerous roads, and the need to leave home earlier to get to work on time. He had developed an almost mechanical relationship with weather, seeing it only as a variable that affected his daily calculations of time and productivity. It was like an animal that learned to adapt to seasons without ever really appreciating the beauty of change. He never imagined that one of these storms would be the catalyst for the greatest transformation of his life, the moment when everything would change forever. Like an experienced accountant who knows that numbers always tell a story, Daniel was about to discover that his own story was just beginning to be written. The monotony of his days was building the foundation for something extraordinary, even though he couldn't see it yet. It was as if the universe was preparing the stage for a moment of revelation that would completely redefine his existence. His love for life, which had been dormant for so long, was about to be awakened by an encounter he couldn't even imagine. His problem-solving skills, his careful nature, and even his solitude were about to become essential tools for a journey that would test all the limits he had set for himself. Inspiration was coming disguised as a storm, and Daniel was completely unprepared for what was about to come. It was as if his entire life had been a prologue to what was about to happen on that seemingly ordinary Tuesday. On that specific Tuesday, as Daniel followed his usual route on Interstate 25, he had no way of knowing that in a matter of hours, everything would change forever. Life was about to teach him that sometimes we need to rescue something or someone to discover who we really are, beneath all the layers of conformity and fear. The man who avoided extra responsibilities was just a few miles away from embracing the greatest responsibility of his life, one that would force him to confront not only the outside world, but the internal demons he had been avoiding for years. It was as if destiny was preparing a lesson about courage that he didn't even know he needed to learn, and it would all begin with an act of bravery as simple as stopping the car and jumping over a guardrail, a moment that would divide his life into before and after. His love for life was about to be rediscovered in a way he could never have imagined. His journey of self-discovery was hidden around the next curve in the road, waiting for him like an injured animal that needed rescue. Daniel didn't know it, but he was about to learn that sometimes we save others to save ourselves, and that true inspiration comes when we least expect it. The approaching storm wasn't just meteorological, it was emotional, spiritual, and completely transformative. It was as if his entire life had been preparation for this moment when he would finally have the chance to become the man he always had the potential to be. But that revelation was still to come, hidden in the next few hours that would change everything. Have you ever had one of those moments when time simply stops? Daniel was driving on Interstate 25 that Tuesday when the snowstorm began transforming Denver into a movie-worthy scene. The flakes fell thick and heavy, creating a white curtain that reduced visibility to just a few yards. Traffic had slowed to a frustrating crawl, and Daniel was mentally calculating how much time he'd lose getting to the office when something caught his attention on the shoulder. It was just a golden shape against the snow, but there was something about that movement that made his heart race inexplicably. Like an animal following primitive instinct, he slowed down even more, trying to see better through the fogged windshield. What he saw made him hit the brakes so hard that the car skidded slightly on the wet pavement. There, shivering and clearly injured, was a small golden retriever, abandoned on the shoulder of Denver's busiest highway. The love for life that had been dormant in Daniel for so long awakened instantly like a flame finding oxygen. It was as if the universe had placed that animal exactly there, at that moment, to test something fundamental in his soul. The inspiration to act came from a place so deep he didn't even know it existed, a courage that had been hibernating, waiting for the right moment to emerge. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity, Daniel remained paralyzed inside the car, his hands gripping the steering wheel while his rational mind fought against something much more primitive and powerful. His entire life had been built around avoiding risks, not getting involved, keeping his head down and moving forward. Stopping on Interstate 25 during a snowstorm to rescue an injured animal went against all his self-preservation instincts. It was was dangerous, reckless, and completely out of character for someone like him, but as he watched the small golden retriever trying to stand and failing, something inside Daniel broke irreversibly. It was as if he were seeing a reflection of his own lost and wounded soul, abandoned on the roadside of life. The love that had been absent from his existence for so long began pulsing in his chest with an intensity that frightened him. His coworkers always saw him as the guy who never took initiative, who always waited for others to solve problems. But there, in that crucial moment, Daniel felt a strength he didn't recognize as his own. It was as if a dormant animal inside him had finally awakened, ready to fight for something that mattered. Courage didn't come like lightning. It emerged slowly, like boiling water, until it became impossible to ignore. It was the first genuinely altruistic impulse he'd felt in years, perhaps decades. Without thinking twice, because thinking would mean backing down, Daniel turned on his hazard lights, parked on the shoulder, and got out of the car. The storm's icy wind hit him like a slap in the face, but he barely noticed the cold. His dress shoes slipped on the snow as he walked toward the guardrail, but his determination was unwavering. It was as if he were being guided by a greater force, an inspiration that came from a place deeper than logic or fear. The golden retriever saw him approaching and tried to move away, but was clearly too weak to flee. Daniel could see now that the animal wasn't just injured. There were obvious signs of abuse, old scars mixed with recent wounds. His golden coat was dirty and matted, and his brown eyes reflected a sadness that Daniel recognized immediately. It was the same sadness he saw in the mirror every morning, the resignation of someone who had given up expecting something good to happen. But there was also something more in those eyes, a spark of hope that refused to die, like a wild animal that still believes in the possibility of freedom. Daniel knelt in the wet snow, slowly extending his hand, and whispered words of comfort he didn't know he knew. "Hey boy, it's okay now. I'm going to get you out of here." It was the first time in years that his words carried true love and purpose. When the dog allowed him to approach, Daniel felt something heal inside his own heart. Taking the golden retriever in his arms was like embracing a part of himself that had been lost for a long time. The animal was surprisingly light, and Daniel could feel his bones through the wet fur, more evidence of neglect and possible abuse. But what impressed him most was how the dog relaxed in his arms, as if he instinctively knew he had found safety. It was a trust that Daniel didn't feel he deserved, but that filled him with a responsibility that was both terrifying and liberating. As he carried the animal back to the car, he realized this was the first time in years that someone, or something, depended completely on him. The sensation was overwhelming, but also deeply satisfying, as if a missing piece in his life had finally found its place. The love that had been absent from his existence began flowing naturally, like water finding its way after a dam is removed. Daniel placed the dog in the back seat, using his own jacket to keep him warm, and for a moment just stood there watching the animal that had changed everything. It was as if the universe had conspired to place that exact moment in his life, testing whether he still had the courage to do the right thing when it really mattered. The inspiration to continue came naturally. He knew exactly what he needed to do. This wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of a transformation he couldn't even imagine yet. Driving to the nearest veterinarian with an injured animal in the back seat was an experience Daniel would never forget. Every red light seemed to last an eternity, and he found himself talking to the dog as if he were an old friend. "Hang in there, buddy. We're going to get you fixed up." It was strange how the words came out naturally, loaded with a love and care he didn't know he possessed. The golden retriever had settled on the seat, but his eyes remained fixed on Daniel through the rearview mirror, as if he were studying this human who had appeared out of nowhere to save him. Daniel decided to call him Buddy, a name that emerged spontaneously, as if he'd always known that would be the dog's name. It was as if they'd known each other for years, two lost souls who had finally found each other. During the drive, Daniel began questioning what had happened to Buddy, who could have abandoned such a clearly loving and gentle animal. Anger began growing in his chest, not the passive and internalized anger he knew well, but something purer and more directed. It was the first time in years he felt genuine indignation about an injustice, the first time something moved him to the point of wanting to act. The courage that had emerged to rescue Buddy was transforming into something greater, a determination to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. It was as if a dormant animal inside him had awakened, and now it was hungry for justice. The inspiration to do more, be more, was growing with every mile traveled. The Mountain View Animal Hospital was one of those places that immediately conveyed calm and competence. Dr. Samantha Brooks, the veterinarian on duty, was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes that immediately filled with concern when she saw Buddy. Daniel quickly explained how he had found the dog, and he could see her expression harden as she examined the injuries. "This isn't a simple abandonment case," she said, her voice carrying a professional sadness that came from years of seeing similar cases. "This animal was a victim of systematic abuse. Look at these scars here and here. Some are old, others more recent." Daniel felt his stomach turn, but he also felt something more, an iron determination determination he didn't recognize as his own. It was as if each revelation about Buddy's suffering lit a flame of indignation that grew stronger with each moment. Dr. Brooks continued the examination, explaining each injury with the patience of someone who understood that Daniel needed to know the complete truth. "He'll recover," she assured him, "but he'll need special care and lots of love. Are you prepared for that?" The question echoed in the air like a challenge to the universe. Daniel, who had spent years avoiding responsibilities, looked at Buddy and felt an absolute certainty that surprised him. "Yes," he replied, and for the first time in years, his words carried the weight of a true promise. It was as if he were making a vow not only to Buddy, but to a better version of himself that was being born at that exact moment. Dr. Brooks smiled for the first time since Daniel had arrived, and he could see that she had recognized something genuine in his determination. "You know," she said while preparing Buddy's medications, "this is the third similar case we've seen in 2 weeks. All golden retrievers, all with the same pattern of injuries." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. It was as if a piece of a sinister puzzle had just clicked into place in his analytical mind. His experience in finding patterns in data was being activated in a completely new, but equally important way. "Do you think there might be a connection?" he asked, and he could see in the veterinarian's eyes that she had been thinking the same thing. "I can't prove anything," she replied carefully, "but my instinct tells me yes. Unfortunately, cases like these are rarely investigated properly. There aren't enough resources, not enough public interest." Daniel felt inspiration growing within him, a need to do something that went far beyond just caring for Buddy. It was as if the love he had discovered for this animal was expanding to include all animals that might be suffering in the same way. The courage he had used to rescue Buddy was transforming into something greater, a mission he didn't fully understand yet, but knew he needed to embrace. It was as if his life had finally found real purpose, and it all began with a simple act of compassion in a snowstorm. While waiting for Buddy to finish the veterinary procedures, Daniel found himself thinking about how his life had completely changed in a matter of hours. This morning he was just another anonymous accountant following his meaningless routine. Now he was responsible for a life, had a mission, and felt an energy he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if a dormant animal inside him had finally awakened, bringing with it instincts and capabilities he didn't even know he possessed. The love that had been absent from his life for so long was flowing freely, initially directed toward Buddy, but already beginning to expand into something greater. He thought about Amanda and how surprised she would be to learn that her initiative-lacking brother had stopped traffic to rescue an injured animal. The inspiration to be a better person, to make a difference in the world, was growing within him like a seed that had finally found fertile soil. Daniel looked at Buddy, who was being carefully examined by Dr. Brooks, and felt deep gratitude for that moment of courage that had changed everything. It was as if the universe had been waiting for him to take the first step, and now was ready to show him a path he had never imagined. Life was about to become much more complicated, much more dangerous, and infinitely more meaningful. And it all began with a simple act of love in a snowstorm, when an ordinary man decided that some things were worth the risk. Have you ever had the feeling that you were about to discover something that would change your life forever? Daniel spent the next few days caring for Buddy with a dedication that surprised him. He transformed his sterile apartment into a real home, buying a dog bed, toys, and even some plants to bring life to the environment. It was as if Buddy had brought color to a world that had been black and white for years. But while watching his new companion recover, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Brooks's words about the other similar cases. His analytical mind, trained to find patterns in numbers, was now obsessed with finding connections in something much more sinister. It was like a hunting animal following a trail. He knew there was something bigger behind Buddy's abandonment. The love he felt for the golden retriever was transforming into a burning need to protect other animals that might be suffering. The inspiration to investigate came in waves, especially when he saw Buddy wake from nightmares, trembling and whimpering softly. In those moments, Daniel felt anger growing inside him, an indignation that demanded action. It was the first time in years he felt true passion for something, and that passion was directed toward justice. The courage he had used to rescue Buddy was multiplying, preparing him for challenges he couldn't even imagine yet. Each day that passed with his new companion strengthened his determination to discover the truth no matter where it led him. The investigation began innocently, with Daniel spending his evenings researching animal abandonment cases in Denver online. What he discovered left him both nauseated and furious. There were dozens of reports about golden retrievers found injured in the metro area over the past 6 months, all with with the same pattern of injuries, all abandoned in similar locations, all clearly victims of systematic abuse. It was as if someone was using these animals for something terrible and then disposing of them like trash. Daniel began mapping the locations where the dogs had been found, using his data analysis skills to create geographic patterns. What emerged was an almost perfect circle around an industrial area in Denver's suburbs, a place Daniel knew well because several companies he audited had operations there. The connection hit him like a punch to the stomach. He was looking at evidence of an organized operation, not isolated cases of cruelty. His love for Buddy was transforming into a larger mission, a need to expose and stop whoever was behind this. It was as if his quiet life had been just preparation for this moment, when he would finally have the chance to use his skills for something that truly mattered. The inspiration to continue investigating came from a source he didn't recognize, a moral courage that had been dormant but was now completely awake. Each new discovery fed his determination like fuel on a fire that refused to be extinguished. Daniel decided to visit some of the locations where other dogs had been found, taking Buddy along to see if he would react in any special way. It was a risky idea, but his intuition told him that Buddy could be the key to understanding what was happening. At the third location they visited, an abandoned parking lot behind a warehouse complex, Buddy had a reaction that confirmed Daniel's worst fears. The dog began trembling violently, hid behind Daniel's legs, and made a sound that was half whimper, half growl of pure terror. It was as if he were reliving a terrible trauma, and Daniel felt his heart break, seeing the animal that had become his reason for living in such a state of panic. But he also felt something more, an iron determination that surprised him with its intensity. It was as if a protective animal had awakened inside him, ready to fight against any threat to his companion. Daniel picked up Buddy, whispering words of comfort, but his eyes were mapping the location, searching for clues his trained mind could interpret. That's when he noticed the security cameras pointed at the parking lot, and an idea began to form. If he could get access to the recordings, maybe he could identify who was abandoning the animals. His love for Buddy was transforming into a crusade for justice, and Daniel felt an energy he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if his life had finally found real purpose, something worth fighting for. The inspiration to continue came from a deep place, fueled by the need to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. In that moment, embracing his traumatized companion, Daniel silently swore he would do anything to prevent other animals from going through the same suffering. Getting access to the security recordings required Daniel to use professional connections he had never explored before. He discovered that one of the warehouses belonged to a Johnson & Associates client, and managed to convince the security manager to let him review the footage under the pretext of a routine audit. What he saw in the recordings left him simultaneously sick and energized. There were at least 6 documented incidents in the past 3 months, always the same pattern, always at night, always involving dark vans that arrived, dumped injured animals, and left quickly. Daniel managed to capture some partial license plates and faces in the recordings, and his analytical mind began working like never before. It was as if all his years of experience in financial investigation were being channeled into something infinitely more important than quarterly reports. His love for Buddy was expanding to include all the animals that had suffered, and Daniel felt a responsibility that was both terrifying and liberating. He began researching the vehicle plates, using online resources and even paying for background checks. What he discovered shocked him. At least 2 of the vehicles were registered to companies he recognized as clients of his own accounting firm. The connection was impossible to ignore, and Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. It was as if he were discovering that the evil he sought was closer than he had ever imagined. The courage he had used to rescue Buddy was being tested in a completely new way, but he knew he couldn't back down now. The inspiration to continue came from a source he was just beginning to recognize, his own capacity to make a difference in the world. Each clue discovered brought him closer to a truth that would change everything. The most shocking discovery came when Daniel decided to investigate the companies behind the vehicles more deeply. Using his financial analysis skills, he began examining public records and reports he had prepared for these clients over the years. What he found was a pattern of suspicious transactions that his trained mind immediately recognized as possible money laundering. Large amounts of cash flowing in and out of accounts without adequate explanation, transfers to shell companies, and vaguely classified expenses that had never raised suspicions during his routine audits. It was as if he were seeing a puzzle that had been in front of him for years, but only now could he see clearly. His love for Buddy was transforming into an obsession with truth, a need to expose not just the animal abuse, but the entire corruption network that sustained it. Daniel realized he had stumbled onto something much bigger than he had imagined, a criminal operation that used dogfighting not just for illegal entertainment, but as a front to launder dirty money. The irony was bitter. He, who had spent years auditing these companies without suspecting anything, was now discovering the truth through love for a rescued animal. It was as if Buddy had been sent not just to save Daniel from mediocrity, but to guide him toward a discovery that could change everything. The courage needed to continue was intimidating, but the inspiration came from an inexhaustible source: the need to protect the innocent and deliver justice. Daniel knew his life was about to become much more complicated, but he also knew there was no going back. Each document analyzed revealed more layers of a conspiracy that left him simultaneously horrified and determined. As Daniel delved deeper into his investigation, he began to realize he wasn't just discovering crimes, he was discovering a version of himself he never knew existed. The man who had spent years avoiding conflicts and responsibilities was now voluntarily putting himself in the path of dangerous criminals. It was as if Buddy had awakened not just his capacity to love, but also his moral courage and thirst for justice. Each new discovery energized him instead of frightening him, as if he had finally found his true calling. Daniel began documenting everything meticulously, creating detailed files that connected the companies, vehicles, suspicious financial transactions, and animal abandonment cases. It was work that required the precision of an accountant and the determination of a detective, and he discovered he possessed both qualities in abundance. His love for Buddy was transforming into love for justice, and Daniel felt a passion he hadn't experienced in years. It was as if his life had finally found direction and purpose, but he was also beginning to realize that his discoveries would put him in an impossible position. As someone who worked for the company that audited these criminal organizations, he was about to face a dilemma that would test not just his courage, but his very integrity. The inspiration to do the right thing was growing within him, but Daniel knew the price would be high. It was as if he were preparing for a battle that would change his life forever, and it all began with a simple act of compassion in a snowstorm. Each night working on his investigation brought him closer to a decision that couldn't be undone. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Daniel discovered records of regular payments between the suspect companies and an organization he recognized immediately. It was a discovery that left him physically sick and mentally energized at the same time. The animal abuse wasn't just random cruelty. It was part of an organized system involving people in positions of power and trust. Daniel spent hours analyzing the data, checking and double-checking his findings, hoping he was wrong, but knowing deep down he had discovered something terrible and real. His love for Buddy had transformed into a mission that was bigger than he had ever imagined. It was as if a dormant animal inside him had awakened with an insatiable hunger for justice. He began to understand that his quiet, purposeless life had actually been preparation for this moment. All his skills, all his experience, all his meticulous nature were being channeled to expose a corruption network that extended far beyond what he had initially imagined. The courage needed to continue was intimidating, but the inspiration came from a source he was just beginning to understand: his own capacity to make a difference when it really mattered. Daniel knew he was about to face the most important decision of his life, a choice that would define not just his future but who he really was deep down. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping would mean flying or falling, but that standing still was no longer an option. Life was about to become a dangerous and significant adventure, and he felt a mixture of terror and excitement he had never experienced before. While organizing his discoveries on a particularly long night, with Buddy sleeping peacefully at his feet, Daniel realized he had reached a point of no return. The evidence he had collected was sufficient to expose a significant criminal network, but doing so would mean destroying his own professional life and possibly putting himself in physical danger. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that jumping would mean flying or falling, but that standing still was no longer an option. His love for Buddy had transformed into something much bigger, a moral responsibility that extended to all the animals that were suffering and all the people being harmed by the corruption he had discovered. Daniel looked at his sleeping companion and felt deep gratitude for that moment of courage in the storm that had changed everything. It was as if Buddy had been the catalyst for a transformation that was just beginning. The courage he had used to rescue an animal was preparing for something much bigger. The courage to face corruption, to risk everything for justice, and to become the man he always had the potential to be. The inspiration to continue came from a growing certainty that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of personal cost. Daniel knew the coming days would test everything he thought he knew about himself, but he also knew there was no turning back. Life was about to become a dangerous and significant adventure, and he was finally ready to embrace it. But first, he would need to face a truth that would hit him like lightning, changing not just his mission, but his understanding of who his real enemies were. Have you ever had one of those moments when the ground simply disappears from under your feet? Daniel was organizing his evidence on a Monday morning when he decided to do a final check on the financial records of the companies involved. It was a routine that had become almost obsessive. Review, analyze, confirm every detail before making any decision about how to proceed. Buddy was lying next to his makeshift desk, occasionally lifting his head as if sensing the growing tension in the air. Daniel had spent weeks building a solid case, documenting connections between the suspect companies, animal abandonment cases, and irregular financial transactions. It was like assembling a complex puzzle where each piece revealed a clearer and more disturbing image. His love for Buddy had transformed into a crusade for justice that consumed his thoughts and energy. But nothing could have prepared him for what he discovered when he decided to investigate more deeply the company that seemed to be the center of the entire operation. The inspiration to continue his investigation was about to transform into something much darker. It was as if the universe was preparing the final test of his courage and integrity. Daniel typed the main company's name into his Johnson & Associates file system, expecting to find basic audit records. What appeared on the screen made him feel as if he had been punched in the stomach. The company wasn't just a client, it was the firm's most important client, responsible for almost 30% of all annual revenue. The revelation hit Daniel like a wild animal attacking its prey. Whitman Enterprises, the company at the center of the entire criminal network he had discovered, wasn't just audited by Johnson & Associates, it was personally supervised by his boss, Gregory Whitman. The connection was impossible to ignore, and Daniel felt his hands tremble as he opened file after file, confirming his worst fears. Gregory wasn't just the accountant for the criminal company, he was the owner, using a slightly different name in public records to avoid detection. It was like discovering that the man he trusted to sign his paychecks was behind all the suffering that Buddy and dozens of other animals had endured. The love he felt for his companion instantly transformed into a rage he had never experienced before. It was pure, burning indignation that demanded immediate action. But along with the rage came fear, an icy terror that his own position in the company made him an unwitting accomplice to terrible crimes. Daniel looked at Buddy, who had approached and was looking at him with those brown eyes full of trust, and felt the weight of a responsibility that was both inspiring and terrifying. It was as if fate had conspired to place him exactly in the position where he could make the biggest difference, but also where he would face the greatest personal risk. The courage he had used to rescue Buddy was being tested in a way he had never imagined possible. The dilemma that presented itself to Daniel was devastating in its cruel simplicity. Reporting Gregory would mean not just losing his job, but potentially destroying his entire accounting career. Who would believe that he had worked so close to a criminal operation for years without suspecting anything? His professional reputation would be ruined, his chances of finding another job in the field would be practically nil, and he would face possible retaliation from dangerous people who had much to lose. It was like being trapped between two walls slowly closing in. Doing the right thing would mean sacrificing everything he had built in his adult life. But looking at Buddy and remembering all the other animals that had suffered made the choice simultaneously impossible and inevitable. His love for his companion had transformed into something bigger, a moral responsibility that couldn't be ignored, no matter the personal cost. Daniel spent hours pacing the apartment, Buddy following his steps as if understanding the gravity of the situation. It was as if the dog knew that the man who had rescued him was facing his own storm, and was offering the same silent support he had received that fateful night on Interstate 25. The inspiration to do the right thing came in waves, alternating with moments of pure panic about the consequences. It was a battle between the man he had been, cautious, risk-averse, prioritizing his own safety, and the man Buddy had helped awaken. The necessary courage seemed impossible to gather, but also impossible to ignore. The psychological pressure of keeping the secret while continuing to work alongside Gregory every day was almost unbearable. Daniel found himself studying his boss's face during meetings, looking for signs of the cruelty he knew existed behind the professional facade. It was like working alongside a disguised predator, knowing that at any moment the mask could fall. Gregory remained the same apparently respectable man as always, polite, efficient, concerned with company results. But now Daniel saw every interaction through a different lens, knowing that the hands that signed reports were also stained with the suffering of innocent animals. His love for Buddy intensified each day, fueled by the rage of knowing that the man responsible for his pain was so close. It was a situation that tested not just Daniel's courage, but his very sanity. He began having nightmares where Gregory discovered his investigation, where Buddy disappeared again, where he himself became a victim of retaliation. The inspiration to act came in moments of clarity, usually when he was caring for Buddy and saw the scars that still marked his golden body. It was as if the dog were a constant reminder of why the fight was worth worth it, regardless of the fear Daniel felt. Courage fluctuated like a flame in a storm, sometimes strong and bright, other times almost extinguishing completely, but it never disappeared totally, fed by the love that had transformed his life. Gregory's involvement also explained many things Daniel had considered strange over the years. The frequent and unexplained trips, meetings at unusual hours, clients who never visited the office personally. It was as if pieces of a puzzle he didn't even know he was assembling finally fit together, revealing an image that made him sick. Daniel realized he had been used as a facade of respectability, his reputation as a meticulous and honest accountant serving to give credibility to Gregory's operations. It was a personal betrayal that cut deeply, adding a layer of humiliation to his anger. His love for Buddy was transforming into a burning need to expose not just the crimes, but the hypocrisy of a man who presented himself as respectable while causing terrible suffering. Daniel began to understand that his unique position as a trusted employee with access to privileged information made him perhaps the only person capable of gathering enough evidence for a conviction. It was a responsibility he had never asked for, but now recognized as his own. The inspiration to continue came from a source he was just beginning to understand: his own capacity to deliver justice when others couldn't or wouldn't. It was as if his entire life had been preparation for this moment, when he would finally have the chance to use his skills for something truly important. The necessary courage seemed impossible to gather, but Daniel knew that doing nothing would be a betrayal not just to Buddy, but to all the animals that would continue suffering if he remained silent. The nights became a torture of indecision and planning. Daniel spent hours researching the best ways to report organized crime, studying similar cases, trying to understand how to protect himself and Buddy from the inevitable consequences. It was like preparing for a war where he was clearly outnumbered and outresourced. Buddy seemed to sense the growing tension, staying closer to Daniel, offering the silent comfort that only a truly loving animal can provide. It was ironic that the dog who had been a victim of the crimes was now the source of strength to expose them. The love between them had become a transformative force that gave Daniel the courage he never knew he possessed. But with each day that passed without action, he felt the weight of involuntary complicity growing. It was like carrying a stone that got heavier every hour, knowing that the only way to get rid of it was to face the consequences of revealing it. The inspiration to act came at unexpected moments, when he saw Buddy playing and remembered how he had been found, when he read news about other cases of animal cruelty, when he simply looked into his companion's eyes and saw the absolute trust the dog placed in him. It was as if Buddy were silently asking, "Are you going to let this happen to others like me?" The courage needed to answer no was growing within Daniel, fed by love and indignation. It was a transformation he didn't recognize as his own, but knew was real and irreversible. The final decision came on a Friday night, when Daniel found evidence that new animals had been abandoned that week. The discovery hit him like a wounded animal attacking in desperation. He could no longer pretend he had time to plan the perfect approach or wait for the ideal moment. Other buddies were suffering while he hesitated, and this realization broke his paralysis once and for all. His love for his companion expanded to include all animals that needed protection, and Daniel felt a determination that was both terrifying and liberating. It was as if a greater force was working through him, giving him the courage he didn't know he possessed. He looked at Buddy, who was sleeping peacefully on the couch, and made a silent promise. No matter what happened to his career, his safety, or his comfortable life, he would do the right thing. The inspiration to act finally overcame the fear of consequences. It was as if his entire life had been preparation for this moment of absolute moral choice. Daniel knew that Monday morning, when he returned to the office, everything would change forever. He had found his courage, fed by the purest love he had ever experienced, and was ready to face whatever storm lay ahead. Life was about to become a battle, but for the first time in years, Daniel felt he was fighting for something that truly mattered. It was as if Buddy had not just rescued his capacity to love, but also his capacity to be brave when courage was most needed. The weekend passed in a fog of preparation and anticipation. Daniel organized all the evidence, made backup copies of all documents, and researched the best lawyers specializing in organized crime whistleblowing. It was as if he were preparing his own declaration of war against forces much larger and more powerful than himself. Buddy remained by his side throughout the process, as if understanding that something monumental was about to happen. The love between them had become the source of all the courage Daniel would need to face the difficult days ahead. It was a complete transformation of the man he had been, from someone who avoided conflicts to someone who was about to initiate the biggest conflict of his life. The inspiration came from a growing certainty that some battles need to be fought, regardless of the odds of victory. Daniel knew that Monday would be the first day of the rest of his life, a life that would finally have purpose and real meaning. It was as if Buddy had been sent not just to be rescued, but to teach Daniel how to rescue himself and others who needed protection. Courage was finally ready to be tested, ended, and Daniel would soon discover if love was truly stronger than fear. It was the moment of truth when he would discover who he really was when everything was at stake. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to jump off a cliff without knowing if there's water or rocks below? Daniel found out on Monday morning when he finally gathered the courage to call the FBI and schedule a meeting. His hands trembled as he dialed the number, and Buddy seemed to sense the tension, staying closer as if offering silent moral support. The conversation was surreal. Daniel heard himself explaining to a federal agent that he had discovered a money laundering network through illegal dogfighting, and that his own boss was at the center of it all. It was as if he were narrating someone else's life, a brave version of himself he barely recognized. His love for Buddy had become the driving force behind every word, every decision, every step toward the unknown. The inspiration to do the right thing was finally overcoming his fear of consequences. It was as if a dormant animal inside him had fully awakened, ready to fight for justice. The agent, Special Agent Sarah Martinez, scheduled a meeting for that afternoon, and Daniel spent the rest of the morning at the office trying to act normally, while his inner world was in complete revolution. It was like playing a role in a play where he only knew his own lines, not knowing how the other characters would react. The courage he had gathered seemed both fragile and powerful, like a flame that could light the way or be extinguished by the first strong wind. But there was no turning back. The process had begun, and Daniel knew his life would never be the same. It was as if Buddy had not only awakened his capacity to love, but also his moral obligation to protect others who couldn't protect themselves. The FBI meeting was simultaneously validating and terrifying. Agent Martinez and her team took Daniel's evidence very seriously, confirming that his discoveries were not only accurate, but represented just the tip of a much larger iceberg. It was like discovering that the small hole you found in the wall actually revealed an entire structure about to collapse. They explained they had been investigating similar operations in the region, but had never gotten someone with inside access to the financial operations. Daniel was exactly what they needed, an experienced accountant with documented evidence and personal motivation to see justice done. His love for Buddy had literally become the key to dismantling a criminal network that extended far beyond what he had imagined. But with this revelation came a frightening reality. Daniel would have to continue working normally while wearing a wire, collecting additional evidence that could be used in court. It was like being an undercover actor in his own life, playing the role of loyal employee while secretly documenting crimes. The inspiration to continue came from the certainty that he was making a difference, but the fear was constant and suffocating. It was like living with a wild animal inside his chest, always ready to attack with panic. Agent Martinez assured him he would have protection, but Daniel knew that once Gregory discovered the betrayal, there would be no safe place. The courage needed to accept this mission seemed impossible to gather, but when he thought about Buddy and all the other animals that were suffering, the choice became inevitable. It was as if love had become a force more powerful than fear, transforming him into someone capable of facing dangers that would have previously paralyzed him completely. The first weeks as an informant were a psychological hell that tested every fiber of Daniel's sanity. He had to sit in the same meetings with Gregory, smile at the same jokes, and pretend interest in the same projects, all while secretly recording conversations that could send his boss to prison for decades. It was like living in two simultaneous realities, one where he was the reliable accountant as always, another where he was an undercover agent of justice. Buddy became his emotional anchor during this period, the only being in the world who knew his true identity and mission. The love between them intensified in a way Daniel had never experienced, as if they shared a secret that united them against the entire world. Each night, Daniel came home mentally exhausted, but Buddy was always there, offering the silent comfort that only a truly loving animal can provide. It was like having a therapist who never judged, never questioned, just offered unconditional presence. The inspiration to continue came from these moments of pure connection, when Daniel remembered why he had started this dangerous journey. But the stress was taking its toll. He lost weight, began having insomnia, and developed constant paranoia that Gregory would discover his betrayal. It was like carrying a bomb that could explode at any moment, destroying not just his life, but potentially putting Buddy in danger too. Courage fluctuated daily, sometimes strong as steel, other times fragile as glass, but it never completely disappeared, fed by the love that had transformed his existence. It was as if Buddy were a constant reminder that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of personal cost. The inevitable discovery happened on a rainy Thursday, 3 weeks after Daniel had begun cooperating with the FBI. He was in the office bathroom when he heard Gregory talking on the phone phone in his office, and something in the tone made him stop and listen. "We have a problem. Someone's asking questions about the warehouse operations." Daniel felt his blood freeze when he realized Gregory was talking about him, or at least about his investigation. It was like hearing his own death sentence being pronounced in real time. He returned to his desk trying to act normally, but his hands shook so much he could barely type. It was like trying to maintain composure while a predator circled around him, knowing that any false move could trigger an attack. Daniel discreetly sent a text message to Agent Martinez, using the code they had established for emergencies. The response came quickly. "Leave the office immediately. Go home and wait for contact." His love for Buddy transformed into pure panic. If Gregory suspected him, Buddy could also be in danger. The inspiration to protect his companion overcame any concern for his own safety. Daniel invented an excuse about not feeling well and left the office, each step seeming like an eternity. It was like fleeing a burning building, knowing that at any moment everything could collapse. The courage that had sustained him for weeks was being tested in a way he had never imagined, but the need to protect Buddy gave him a strength he didn't know he possessed. It was as if love had literally become a matter of life and death, transforming fear into iron determination. The hasty flight from the office marked the beginning of the most terrifying period of Daniel's life. Agent Martinez appeared at his apartment 2 hours later, accompanied by a security team that transformed his home into a temporary fortress. It was like being in an action movie, except the fear was real and the consequences could be fatal. They explained that Gregory had discovered the investigation and was taking measures to eliminate evidence and potential witnesses. Daniel was now officially a target, and Buddy was also in danger by association. His love for his companion transformed into a fierce protection that Daniel didn't recognize as his own. It was as if a protective animal had awakened inside him, willing to do anything to keep Buddy safe. The FBI team explained they would have to enter witness protection temporarily until they could arrest Gregory and dismantle the entire network. It was a terrifying prospect, leaving everything behind, living in hiding, never knowing if they were truly safe. But when Daniel looked at Buddy, who was calmly lying at his feet as if completely trusting his ability to protect him, the choice became clear. The inspiration to keep fighting came from an inexhaustible source, the unconditional love of an animal that had transformed his life. It was as if Buddy were silently saying, "I trust you, no matter what happens." The courage needed to face the unknown came from that trust, that sacred responsibility to protect the one who had first protected him from a meaningless life. It was as if fate had conspired to bring them together at this moment, when they both needed each other more than ever. The period in the safe house was a surreal experience that tested both Daniel's sanity and determination. He and Buddy were taken to an isolated house in the Colorado mountains, where they spent 3 weeks living under federal protection, while the FBI built their case. It was like being in limbo between his previous life and a completely uncertain future. Buddy adapted to the situation with the natural grace of animals, exploring the new house and fenced yard as if it were an adventure. But Daniel struggled with the emotional claustrophobia of being trapped, even if it was for his own protection. His love for Buddy became his only constant in a world that had become completely unstable. It was as if the dog were his anchor to reality, constantly reminding him why he had started this dangerous journey. During this period, Daniel had time to reflect on how his life had completely changed since that snowstorm. It was like comparing two different people, the man he had been, living in safe mediocrity, and the man he had become, fighting for justice despite the risks. The inspiration to continue came from a growing understanding that he had found his true purpose in life. It was no longer just about saving Buddy or exposing Gregory. It was about discovering who he really was when tested by the most extreme circumstances. Courage had become part of his identity, not just a temporary quality he had borrowed for a specific situation. It was as if Buddy had not only awakened his capacity to love, but also his capacity to be brave when courage was most needed. Even in the uncertainty of the safe house, Daniel knew he had made the right choices and would continue making them regardless of consequences. During the long nights in the safe house, Daniel began to realize that his transformation had gone far beyond what he had initially imagined. He was no longer the man who avoided responsibilities and lived in a meaningless routine. His love for Buddy had awakened something fundamental in his nature, a need to protect the vulnerable and fight against injustice. It was like discovering muscles he never knew he had, capabilities that had been dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Buddy seemed to understand the magnitude of change in his human companion, offering constant and comforting presence during moments of greatest anxiety. It was as if the dog knew he had not only been rescued, but had also been the catalyst for Daniel's rescue from a purposeless life. The inspiration to keep fighting came from a source Daniel was just beginning to understand, his own capacity to make a difference when it really mattered. He began dreaming about what he would do after everything was over, how he could use his experience to help other animals and expose other injustices. It was as if his mind mind were expanding to include possibilities he had never considered before. The courage he had discovered wasn't a limited resource, but something that grew stronger with each challenge faced. It was as if Buddy had planted a seed of heroism that was blooming into something much greater than either of them could have imagined. Daniel knew that regardless of what happened in the coming days, he would never again be the same man he had been before that fateful snowstorm. The news about Gregory's arrest came on a sunny Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Daniel and Buddy had entered protection. Agent Martinez called personally to inform him that the operation had been a complete success. Gregory and 17 other people had been arrested. The money laundering network had been dismantled, and the dog-fighting operations had been permanently shut down. It was like receiving confirmation that all the pain, fear, and sacrifice had been worth it. Daniel felt a mixture of relief, triumph, and emotional exhaustion that left him temporarily speechless. His love for Buddy had literally changed the world, at least the small piece of the world where innocent animals were suffering. It was a victory that transcended any professional achievement Daniel had ever experienced. Buddy, as if sensing the change in his companion's mood, approached and placed his head in Daniel's lap, offering the same silent comfort he had provided during the most difficult moments. It was as if the dog knew the battle had been won, but that the war for justice never really ends. The inspiration Daniel felt wasn't just about what they had accomplished, but about what they could still do together. It was as if this victory were just the first chapter of a much larger story they would write together. The courage he had discovered wasn't a limited resource he had exhausted, but a renewable source that grew stronger with each challenge faced. Daniel knew his life had changed forever, and that he would never again be the man who avoided responsibilities and lived without purpose. It was as if Buddy had not only rescued his soul, but also revealed his true potential as a force for good in the world, preparing him for a new phase of life that would be even more meaningful. Have you ever experienced that feeling of waking up in a completely new world, even while being in the same place as always? Daniel lived this when he could finally return home after Gregory was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The trial had lasted 6 months, during which Daniel testified courageously, facing threats and intimidation with a determination that surprised even Agent Martinez. It was as if the shy and avoidant man he had been had died in that snowstorm, giving way to someone completely new. Buddy was by his side throughout the entire process. Literally, the court had allowed the dog to accompany him as an emotional support animal, recognizing the central role he had played in exposing the crimes. The love between them had become a force that transcended simple companionship. It was a partnership forged in adversity and tempered by courage. When the judge read the final sentence, Daniel felt not just relief, but a deep satisfaction that came from knowing he had made a difference. It was as if his entire previous life had been just preparation for this moment of justice. The inspiration he felt wasn't about the end of a battle, but about the beginning of a much larger mission. It was as if the universe had tested his courage and was now ready to show him his true purpose. The courage he had discovered wasn't a temporary resource, but a permanent part of who he had become. Daniel knew his life was about to take a completely new direction, guided by love and the need to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The first challenge after the trial was rebuilding his professional life. Daniel had lost his job at Johnson & Associates, an inevitable consequence of exposing the company's biggest client as a criminal. It was like starting from scratch at 33. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel afraid of the unknown. His love for Buddy had given him a confidence he never knew he possessed, and the experience of facing dangerous criminals made job searching seem like a trivial task. He decided to use his accounting skills in a completely different way, offering forensic audit services to nonprofits that suspected financial mismanagement. It was like using his experience in finding discrepancies for a greater cause, helping organizations that did important work but didn't have resources for expensive investigations. The inspiration for this career change came from a growing understanding that his skills could be a force for good in the world. Buddy adapted perfectly to the new routine, accompanying Daniel on visits to animal shelters, rescue organizations, and other charitable entities that became his clients. It was as if the dog knew they were embarking on a greater mission, using their past experiences to help others. The courage he had developed during Gregory's investigation now manifested as entrepreneurial determination and passion for social justice. Daniel discovered that working for causes he believed in was infinitely more satisfying than preparing reports for companies that only cared about profits. It was as if he had finally found the perfect intersection between his skills and his values, creating a career that was both sustainable and meaningful. The idea of founding an animal rescue organization arose naturally from Daniel's experiences with Buddy and his work with other nonprofits. He had seen firsthand how lack of financial resources limited these organizations' ability to save more animals, and his experience in financial management could make a real difference. It was as if all the pieces of his life were fitting together to create something much greater than he had ever imagined. Buddy became not just the inspiration for the organization, but also its first official employee. His rescue and recovery story would be used to educate the public about signs of abuse and the importance of reporting. Daniel's love for his companion expanded to include all animals that needed help, transforming into a passion that consumed his energy in a positive way. He used his savings and the reward he had received from the FBI for his cooperation to rent a small office and hire 2 part-time employees. It was like planting a seed he knew would grow into something extraordinary, fueled by the same determination he had used to expose Gregory. The inspiration to continue came from each animal they managed to rescue, each success story they documented, each life they managed to transform. Daniel discovered he had a natural talent for fundraising, using his own story to touch the hearts of donors and volunteers. It was as if his traumatic experience had transformed into a powerful tool for good. The courage he had discovered during the most difficult months of his life now manifested as inspiring leadership and entrepreneurial vision. It was as if Buddy had not only rescued his soul, but also revealed his potential as a leader and agent of change. The growth of Buddy's Second Chance Animal Rescue exceeded all of Daniel's expectations. In just 1 year, they had rescued over 200 animals, established partnerships with local veterinarians, and created an educational program that visited schools to teach children about animal compassion. It was like watching a dream materialize in real time, fueled by the love and determination that had been born from that fateful snowstorm. Buddy became a local celebrity, appearing at fundraising events and serving as the organization's ambassador. His gentle personality and inspiring story touched the hearts of everyone who met him, transforming him into a living symbol of hope and recovery. The love between Daniel and Buddy had become the heart of the organization, demonstrating the transformative power of compassion for both animals and humans. Daniel discovered he had a gift for storytelling, using his personal experience to inspire others to get involved in the cause. It was as if his personal transformation had become a tool to transform his community. The inspiration to continue expanding came from each success, each animal saved, each human life touched by their mission. He began receiving invitations to speak at conferences about animal welfare, sharing not just Buddy's story, but the lessons about courage and purpose he had learned along the way. It was as if his traumatic experience had transformed into a source of wisdom that could benefit others. The courage he had developed during the darkest days now manifested as confidence to lead and inspire an entire community of people dedicated to animal rescue. Daniel knew he had found not just his calling, but his true identity as a protector of the vulnerable and defender of justice. 3 years after Buddy's rescue, Daniel found himself speaking at a national animal welfare conference with his companion lying calmly beside the podium. It was like looking back and seeing 2 completely different lives, that of the man he had been and the man he had become. The audience was captivated by the story of how a simple act of compassion had transformed into a life mission that had already impacted thousands of animals and people. Buddy, now with a shiny coat and eyes full of life, was living proof that love and proper care could heal even the deepest wounds. It was as if the dog were a silent ambassador of hope, demonstrating that recovery was possible for any being that received the chance. Daniel spoke about how his own transformation had been as dramatic as Buddy's, from a man living on autopilot to someone with clear purpose and burning passion. His love for his companion had expanded to include a larger mission of protecting all vulnerable animals. The inspiration to continue came not just from past successes, but from the vision of a future where no animal would need to suffer as Buddy had suffered. He ended his speech with a reflection on how sometimes we need to rescue others to discover who we really are, and how true love always finds a way to multiply. It was as if his personal story had become a universal parable about transformation and purpose. The courage he had discovered in that snowstorm continued growing, fueled by each life they managed to touch and each injustice they managed to correct. Daniel knew his journey was just beginning, and that Buddy would continue being his partner and inspiration in all the adventures that lay ahead. The organization continued growing, but Daniel never lost sight of what really mattered: the individual connection between humans and animals who needed each other. He instituted a policy where each rescued animal had their story documented and shared, ensuring that no case was just a number in a statistic. It was like creating a living library of stories of hope and transformation, with Buddy as the first and most important chapter. The love that had begun with an injured dog in a storm had multiplied into hundreds of similar stories, each unique, but all connected by the common thread of human compassion. Daniel discovered that his greatest talent wasn't just rescuing animals, but connecting people with the perfect companions for their lives. It was like being a Cupid specialized in interspecies relationships, intuitively understanding which personalities would complement each other. Buddy continued continued being his unofficial consultant, always seeming to know which animals needed extra attention or which visitors were ready to adopt. The inspiration to continue innovating came from a growing understanding that each saved animal had the potential to transform a human life the same way Buddy had transformed his. He began documenting not just the animal stories, but also the transformations that occurred in the families that adopted them. It was like mapping a network of love that spread through the community, creating waves of compassion that went far beyond the organization's direct work. The courage he had discovered during his own transformation now manifested as constant innovation and search for more effective ways to connect needy animals with loving families. Daniel knew he had found a formula that worked: genuine love, hard work, and the unshakable belief that every life has value and potential for happiness. The organization's impact began extending beyond direct animal rescue. Daniel developed educational programs that taught children about responsibility, empathy, and compassion through interactions with rescued animals. It was like planting seeds of kindness that would grow into a more conscious and caring generation. Buddy became the star teacher of these programs, his calm and loving presence demonstrating to children that even those who had suffered abuse could learn to trust and love again. Daniel's love for his companion had transformed into a powerful educational tool, teaching lessons that went far beyond animal care. He watched shy children open up in Buddy's presence, learning that gentleness and patience could heal invisible wounds. It was like witnessing small miracles happen daily, each positive interaction creating waves of change that spread through families and communities. The inspiration to expand these programs came from seeing how rescued animals not only received healing, but also became healers for others. Daniel began working with schools, hospitals, and nursing homes, creating animal-assisted therapy programs that benefited both the animals and the people they visited. It was like discovering that love had infinite multiplying properties, growing exponentially with each new connection formed. The courage he had developed during his own transformation journey now manifested as innovative vision and community leadership. Daniel knew he had created something that transcended a simple rescue organization. It was a compassion movement that was changing how his community thought about the connection between humans and animals. It was as if Buddy had been the catalyst for a silent revolution of kindness that would continue growing long after both of them were no longer there. 5 years after that snowstorm that changed everything, Daniel found himself in his office one night, working on annual reports that showed his organization's extraordinary growth. Buddy was sleeping peacefully in his favorite bed beside the desk, occasionally sighing contentedly as dogs do when they're completely relaxed and happy. It was like contemplating a work of art they had created together, a life full of purpose, love, and positive impact on the world. Daniel looked at the photos on the walls, documenting hundreds of successful rescues, each representing a transformed life and a completed family. The love that had begun with an impulsive act of compassion had multiplied into a network of care that touched thousands of lives annually. He thought about the man he had been, lonely, purposeless, living in a meaningless routine, and could barely recognize that person. It was like comparing a dry seed with a leafy tree, both technically the same entity, but fundamentally transformed. The inspiration he felt wasn't just about what they had accomplished, but about the infinite potential that still existed to do more. Daniel knew his story with Buddy was just one among millions of similar stories waiting to happen, each with the potential to transform lives and create waves of compassion. The courage he had discovered in that storm continued being his driving force, reminding him daily that an ordinary person can make an extraordinary difference when motivated by true love. It was as if Buddy had not only rescued his soul, but revealed a universal truth about the transformative power of compassion. Daniel smiled, gently petted his sleeping companion's head, and returned to work, knowing that each report written, each animal rescued, and each life touched was part of a legacy that began with a simple act of love in a snowstorm. Daniel and Buddy's story shows us that the deepest transformation happens when we choose love over fear, even when it means sacrificing our comfort zone. Daniel began as an ordinary man, living a purposeless life, but a simple act of compassion revealed a courage he didn't even know he possessed. Sometimes rescuing others is the only way to rescue ourselves, and true love always finds a way to multiply, creating waves of change that go far beyond what we can imagine. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing despite fear, especially when those we love depend on our bravery. What's most impressive about this journey is how a single decision can completely redefine the course of a life. Daniel could have driven past in that snowstorm, maintaining his safe and predictable routine, but he chose to stop, chose to care, chose to act. And that choice didn't just save Buddy, it revealed the extraordinary man Daniel always had the potential to be. It's powerful proof that all of us have within us the capacity to make a difference, even when we feel small and insignificant in the face of the world's injustices. Daniel's transformation transformation from mediocre accountant to leader of an organization that saves hundreds of animals annually reminds us that our life's purpose often reveals itself through unexpected moments of compassion. His story proves that when we act driven by genuine love, we find strengths we didn't even know we possessed. Buddy wasn't just rescued by Daniel, he became the catalyst for a much larger mission, demonstrating that sometimes those we save end up saving us back in ways we could never predict. The most powerful lesson from this story is that courage is contagious. When Daniel chose to face corruption and expose the truth, even knowing it would cost his career and safety, he inspired others to act with the same bravery. His rescue organization isn't just about saving animals, it's about creating a community of people who believe every life has value and is worth fighting for the vulnerable. It's proof that an ordinary person, driven by true love, can create extraordinary changes in the world. This story shows that what's hidden always comes to light, and that truth, however harsh, is what frees both the oppressed and the oppressors from destructive cycles. If this transformation journey touched your heart and made you reflect on your own capacity to make a difference, share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that we all have a sleeping hero waiting for the right moment to awaken. Hit like if you believe love and courage can transform the world, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to act with compassion. Sometimes, the right message arrives at exactly the right time to inspire someone to stop the car and jump the guardrail toward their own heroic destiny.